In today's video, we're going to learn some advanced technical SEO tips. If you're new to technical SEO, then I would encourage you to start by watching this video over here, which is called The Ultimate Guide to Technical SEO in Webflow. Otherwise, if you already optimized your site and you would like to push it just a notch higher, then you're going to love these tips that I'm about to share with you in this video. Without further ado, let's get started. So tip number 1, defer third-party scripts. If you followed along with our previous video called The Ultimate Guide to Technical SEO, then you probably did a lot of steps already to reduce your largest contentful paint as well as your first input delay. Now, if you're only left with the scripts on your site that are absolutely critical, then there's an attribute that you can add to your scripts and change things a little bit up so that the scripts get loaded later. And this will ensure that you have an even better performance. So this is how to do it. You have scripts over here. So how this works is essentially we're loading this script first, and then we're creating an instance of a filter here. And this is this filter that we have over here, where we can simply sort through these products. Now, the way we can defer this and even improve our LCP and FID scores is by adding here the attribute of defer. And then there's one more thing we have to do. So here you can see that we're immediately invoking this function and we're running our filter instance. And what we want to do instead is add an event listener here. So we're going to add here window add event listener, and then here we're gonna add the name of the event listener, and in this case it's DOM content loaded. Now we have to delete these brackets over here because these are invoking the function immediately, but we are already having a listener on when the content of the page is going to be loaded to trigger this function. So we no longer need that. All right, and that's it. And now if we hit save and we publish our project again, now this should still be working. However, we are deferring the script, and this will make our page load faster, which also provides a better experience for our user. And our next tip is to reserve required space for content that has to be loaded on our site with something like CSS aspect ratio boxes. Now, first, what the hell does that mean? We have this banner wrapper, and let's just imagine for a second that there is an ad that has to be loaded here. And what often happens on your site is that content simply gets loaded like this. And suddenly we have this ad that pushed all of this content lower. And that's a problem in terms of CLS or cumulative layout shift that contributes to CLS. This ultimately creates a bad experience for the users because people might want to click on something and suddenly this ad appears out of nowhere and pushes everything down. And unfortunately, this is the case on so many websites still. So how do we eliminate this? The way to eliminate CLS, or at least partially reduce it, is by using aspect ratio boxes. So let me show you an example of that. The easiest way to reserve the space is to do the following. So here we have our banner wrapper component, and very often you will know the dimensions of your ads that are going to be loaded later on, or whatever third-party content you have. So for example, if we know that the ratio of the ads is, let's say, 16:3, then we can simply write here 3 divided by 16 times 100%. And this is our bottom margin. And look what happens now. Now that we added this padding, we can't simply paste our ad inside, or we can't just load our ad inside because it would create this unwanted look. So what we should do instead is add inside a div block which is going to hold our ad. So We're going to call it, in this case, banner holder. We're going to set the position to absolute, and we're going to set here full. Now, of course, we also have to make sure that our banner wrapper is set to position relative. And this will place our banner holder inside. And now if we paste our ad, this is working great. Now, this solution works great if you know exactly the dimensions of your ad. However, what happens if our ad would be a little bit bigger? You can see here that if we don't know the ratio of the ad, we might encounter another unwanted problem. So here, for example, I'm going to write 26%. And now if we just paste our ad inside, it's going to have this unwanted overflow, and it might cover some of our content, which we don't want. So what can we do about it? The first option is a little bit dull, and we can simply select this banner wrapper and we can set the overflow to hidden. So if an ad comes in that's bigger than we expected, it will simply be cut off. Now, if 99% of the ads on your site have some standard dimensions, and from time to time it happens that an ad is not having these dimensions, then this solution might be okay. But we have also another option which involves a little bit of CSS, which helps us resolve this in another way. We're gonna cut our ad out as for now, and we're gonna delete this banner holder because we're simply gonna use the banner wrapper only. So the first thing we're going to do here is delete these padding over here that we created earlier. We're gonna just set it in this case to 0. Okay, this works fine. Now let's add our CSS. So first I'm going to select my page wrapper, and here I'm going to add an embed. And here I'm going to paste in some CSS code. So the first thing I have to do is add style tags. Like so. Then inside of it, I'm going to paste my code. I'm going to share this code with you so that you can use it for your own site. All right. So what is this doing? We have the banner wrapper component here. So you can see that I named it exactly the same way as the component there. This is important. If your component is called ad wrapper, then it should be called ad wrapper here, everywhere, at every instance. Okay, so now that we covered that, we have this CSS line that says aspect ratio, and we can adjust the aspect ratio of our banner wrapper here. Okay, so let's have a look at this again. And as you can see here, we don't have any padding. And now you can see that if we simply paste the ad here, it's still gonna be cut because we have this overflow hidden activated. But if we turn it off, it's gonna push our content down. Now, let me guide you through the code and explain how this is working. And as you can see here, we have this aspect ratio property here. And unfortunately, this is not supported in every browser, so this might not work. So we have the rest here, which serves as a fallback. And basically, we have to make sure that we have the same aspect ratio here and here in the fallback as well. So if this would change, for example, if we would have 8:3, we would have to change it here as well. Now, if we save it, we can see that our aspect ratio changed. Of course, the ad is not having the same aspect ratio. Now, you might be thinking, don't we still have some CLS here in our banner wrapper if the ad is bigger than the space we reserved? And yes, we do have some CLS. However, by having these aspect ratio boxes in place, we are reducing that CLS as much as possible. So if we know the aspect ratio of most of the ads, we're eliminating it in 99% of the cases. But for the cases where the ad comes in a different aspect ratio, we are still covering it. We're reducing the CLS as much as possible, but there still will be some CLS. So let's have a look at this. You can see that the banner wrapper here also stretched to accommodate the ad. Okay, and now we're gonna move to our next step, adding structured data. So what is structured data and why is it important? You can see here that we have this script in Google's documentation, as well as on schema.org, where you can find even more details about this, and you can implement this on your site. Now, here's why you should do this. You can see here, if we go to Explore Search Gallery, that we can have these cool featured snippets depending on the content we're having on our site. So you can see we have breadcrumb, carousel here, we have courses as well, data sets, articles, fact checks, and so on. And the best way to get these featured snippets is by implementing schema on your site or structured data on your site. And there are two ways to do this in Webflow. The first way is by using dynamic fields. So here's how to do this. You can see here in the examples how the code looks. So for example, here we're going to go under non-accelerated mobile pages page, and we're going to copy this script over here. Then I'm going to go to my Webflow project and I'm going to implement this on my blog. I'm going to click on the settings icon. I'm going to scroll all the way here to the bottom, and here I already implemented it, but I'm going to do it once again to show you how it's done. So I'm going to paste in this example here, and here I don't want this to be a news article. It's going to be just an article in my case. So I'm going to delete the word news here. All right, and now we can populate these fields over here with our dynamic fields from here. Okay, so here we have headline, and this is going to be our blog post headline. So the way to do it is to add our name here, or our blog's name here. Now make sure that you're inside of these quotation marks, otherwise this will not work. Then here we have images. So here I'm just going to upload my thumbnail image as well as my main image. So we have main image here, thumbnail image, and the last item here I'm going to delete because, let's say for this example, I don't have any more images. So I'm going to delete this line over here, and I'm going to delete this comma over here. And this is important. If you have this comma, this will not work. So one typo can mess up your whole structured data element. So here we have date published. So I'm going to add this as well. Published on. Here I have date modified. We're going to change this to updated on. And then I have author, and this is how I connected my collections essentially. So here I have access also to the author collection. So I'm going to add the field here, and I'm going to go under author name. And here there's a random example URL, and I want to make sure that it's actually the URL of my website. So I'm going to look into this site here. I'm going to paste in a random URL, and here I know that all of my authors are under the author collection. So I'm going to write author and then this line over here, and then I'm going to add here a slug. And this URL then points to the author. Sorry, not slug, but author slug. I have it here. Okay, and I'm not having a second author in this example here, so I can delete the comma together with the second author. And also, since I have only one author right now, I don't need these brackets because it doesn't have to be an array. So you can simply delete this if you have one author. Okay, and now we can basically save this. Now, if I publish my site, I can go and check if this is working. And on this page, Google actually allows you to test if your structured data was implemented correctly. I'm going to link to this page in the description below so you can check it out. And here I'm going to paste the URL of my blog. Okay, I'm going to test the URL. And I can see here that my page is eligible for rich results. And I can also see here if all the information is getting propagated correctly. I can see here the headline, this is working, date published, date modified, awesome, and I can see the author here. Now that we covered this simple implementation of the article, let's have a look at a more advanced implementation of structured data. For example, sometimes you might want to connect multiple types of structured data. You might want to have the article and breadcrumbs and how to, your logo, and so on and so forth. You can chain as many types of structured data as you want with something called the graph keyword. So let's have a look at that. Right here below the context, we want to add another line and write here at graph semicolon, or sorry, colon. And here we're gonna open an array and close it immediately. We're gonna open an object and close it immediately. And inside of this array, we could add as many objects with our structured data as we want. Here, first, we're gonna copy this article object right over here. So let's copy all of this ending here before the last closing tag. We're gonna cut this out. And we're going to paste this inside here. Okay, let me delete this. Sorry. Okay, and normally you would want this to be indented like so. Just a moment. Okay, and we can see now that our object is ending here. And here I'm going to add a comma, and here we're going to add another object. And if you wanted, you could add as many as you want like this. And inside of this, you're going to add the syntax of the object, excluding the context. So let's have a look at an example where we're going to add the breadcrumb object. So we're going to head over to Google's documentation, and this is what we're going to be implementing. Here we can see that we have this URL, and if we add the breadcrumb rich text result, then it looks like this. And this is much prettier to look at than having just the URL by default. So let's have a look at the implementation here. And as we can see, we can copy this object right over here, and we're going to delete the context. So let's get back to our Webflow website. And here, I'm going to delete this object that I created earlier because I copied the whole object. So I'm going to simply paste this in here. And we have our breadcrumb list inside here. Now, as we did earlier, we have to modify this in order for it to work. So we said first we're going to delete the context because whatever context we set here is being shared between every item inside of this array. So we don't need to have the context twice. Okay, now let's customize the rest of it. So first here, we are not having books, we're having a blog. So I'm going to change this to blog, and here I'm going to swap this with our URL. We're going to put in our URL, and here I'm going to write /blog. And this is our first item. And here we're not having the second item. Sorry, here we're not having the third item because it is because this is how the URL is looking. So here we have our URL, then blog, and then we have our article already. So we're going to change this over here. And here we can delete the item over here because it's the last item in the list, and then it's automatically assumed that we're talking about the current URL. So we don't need to add here anything, and the name we're going to swap with the name of our article. that's it. So this should basically be working. So let's have a look at it. We're going to hit save here. We're going to publish our site. And once our site is published, we can head over to the rich text result checker, and we can type in the same URL we had earlier. And we're having an error somewhere. So it seems like I missed a closing tag. Line 71. And let's have a look, where am I having an error? And okay, seems like here I have a comma. So always make sure that if it's the last item in an object, that you delete the comma, because otherwise you're going to have an error. All right, let's save this. Let's publish our site and let's try again. Okay, now that our site is published, let's try to refresh. And there we go. Our page is eligible for rich results. And we can see here that we have the article item and the breadcrumbs as well. And that's it. And our next tip is to add Href-lang attributes to multilingual sites. If you're having a multilingual site, it's essential to have these attributes. This tells search engines which content they should serve. For example, if you have a site in German and English, you're telling Googlebot which is your main site, which is your secondary site, and depending on the person who's searching for stuff, Google will decide which version of your site it will serve to the users. Without Href-lang attributes, your site will seem like it's duplicate because 90% of the content will be the same. So how do you avoid this? How do you tell Google which site is in German and which site is in English, for example? You simply have to add one snippet of code to every instance of your page. For example, here we have the home page in English, and here we have it in German. So we're gonna head over to the head tag, and we're gonna paste in this code. So what we're doing here is we're signaling to Google that we have a German instance of this site and that we have an English one. And also with this canonical link over here, we're telling search engines that this is our main site. So here we're going to change, of course, this URL with, we're going to replace this URL with our own URL. In this case, it would be and then we're going to copy this here. We're going to add it here. And we're going to add it here as well. Now, the last thing we have to do, of course, if you're having it in another language, you should look up the country code. Now, all we have to do is copy this same code and paste it also on our German version of the site. This is easy if you're having only one page or if you're having 2-3 pages. However, if you're having 5 pages translated into 5 languages, then this becomes very, very hard to manage. First of all, if you make a design change, you have to make a design change on all of the pages, on every language. For example, if I wanted to replace this image, I would have to replace it twice. I would have to replace it first on the English instance and then on the German one. And you can imagine if you're having 5-6 languages and 5-6 pages, that's 25 pages if you have 5 of each. Now, if you have more than 2-3 pages, I would recommend you to use a paid solution like Weglot to manage your site translation. Weglot, for example, applies automatically all of these tags, and you can then simply change the wording on inside of their dashboard. So if you're having a bigger site that needs translation, I would definitely encourage you to try a translation solution. And that's it for today. If you followed all of these SEO tips we gave you in the Ultimate Guide to Technical SEO, as well as these tips that I showed you today, then your site is gonna be crazy optimized. If you wanna learn more about technical SEO, I would encourage you to check out Google's documentation. Of course, there are also other important ranking factors like keyword research quality, the quality of your content, and also your copywriting skills. So if you feel like there's more to learn about any of these topics, then put your own effort into it and start researching these topics. They're incredibly important as well. If you want to become a better Webflow developer, then consider subscribing to our channel so that we can notify you whenever we release a new video. Cheers, and thank you so much for watching.